The night my parents showed up at my gate, my mother was crying and my father wouldn't look me in the eyes. 10 years ago, he told me I was dead to him. Now he was asking the security guard if he could come inside my house. Not my apartment, not a rental, my house. The one with iron gates and a circular driveway, and windows so tall you can see the ocean from the second floor. He didn't know I was watching him from the balcony, and for a moment, I was 18 again, standing on the sidewalk with a suitcase, except this time, I wasn't the one being thrown out. Before I tell you how we got here, I want to say something gently. If you've ever been told you were nothing and then had to build yourself into something anyway, this story might feel close to home. If it does, you can like or subscribe, only if you truly connect. And tell me where you're listening from. I always read the comments. It reminds me I wasn't as alone as I thought. I was 18 when my father told me to get out. Not in a rage, not during a screaming match. He said it calmly, like he was asking me to pass the salt. "You made your choice," he said. "Now live with it." My choice was refusing to break up with Daniel. Daniel was 20. He worked construction. His dad owned a small auto shop. He didn't have a trust fund or a polished handshake. He had rough hands and steady eyes, and a laugh that made me feel safe. My father hated him. "Poor people marry for survival," he told me once. "We don't." We. Like I was already drafted into a life I hadn't chosen. Growing up, everything in our house was quiet and expensive. Polished floors, catered dinners, conversations about investments and status. My mother measured worth in zip codes. My father measured it in net profit. I measured it in warmth, and I had never felt warm there. When I brought Daniel home at 17, my mother smiled like he was a stray animal that wandered in. My father shook his hand and later sanitized his own. The humiliation wasn't loud. It was subtle, surgical. Daniel never reacted. That hurt more. The final argument happened 3 weeks after my 18th birthday. My father called me into his office. Mahogany desk, leather chair, floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with books he'd never read. "You will not see him again," he said. "I love him." "You're 18. You don't know what love is." I remember the clock ticking behind him, slow, precise. "I'm not breaking up with him," I said, and something shifted in his face. Not anger, disappointment, which was worse. "Then you can't stay here." I thought he was bluffing. He wasn't. He gave me 1 hour. My mother didn't cry. She packed a small suitcase herself, folded my clothes neatly, added my birth certificate, removed my debit card from the family account. "Call us when you come to your senses," she said. I stood on the curb with 1 suitcase and $312 in my savings account. Daniel picked me up in his truck. He didn't say, "I told you so." He just reached over and squeezed my hand. That night, we slept in his childhood bedroom. Posters still on the wall, paint chipped, window that rattled in the wind. I should have felt shame. Instead, I felt free. The first year was hard. Hard like counting coins for groceries. Hard like working 2 jobs while taking night classes. Hard like hearing from extended relatives that I had ruined my future. My parents cut me off completely. No birthday calls, no holiday invitations. They told people I ran away. They told people I was rebellious. They told people I chose a lower life. I didn't defend myself. I was too busy building one. Daniel worked 14-hour days. I started in retail, then admin work, then I found something I was good at, real estate. Not the glamorous side, the paperwork, the numbers, the overlooked properties nobody wanted. I understood properties the way I understood people. The neglected ones held potential. By 23, I was managing small rental units. By 25, I had my license. By 26, I was flipping properties with investors who liked that I didn't waste time pretending. Daniel and I married quietly at 24. No white wedding, just a courthouse and his mom crying softly in the back. My parents didn't respond to the invitation, but I still sent one. I don't know why. Maybe part of me believed they'd come running if they saw I was serious. They didn't. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't have predicted, was that 10 years later they would be standing outside a property I owned, not because they forgave me, not because they missed me, because they needed something, and they thought I would still be the girl with the suitcase. They were wrong. By 27, I wasn't surviving anymore. I was strategic. The first duplex I bought was ugly. Yellow siding peeling like old sunburn, lawn half dead. Inside smelled like dust and something sour. Everyone told me not to touch it. It's a money pit, one broker said. I walked through it slowly, touched the cracked countertops, looked at the bones. It wasn't broken. It was ignored. I knew that feeling. Daniel and I poured everything into it. Weekends sanding floors, evenings painting walls. He handled structural repairs. I handled permits, financing, tenant contracts. We fought sometimes, quietly, about exhaustion, about risk, but we never fought about leaving. We were a team. That duplex paid off in 18 months. The second property came easier. The third felt almost inevitable. And somewhere in those years, something shifted inside me. The hunger to prove my parents wrong turned into something else. Not revenge, clarity. I stopped imagining their faces when deals closed. I stopped checking social media to see if they'd noticed my name appearing in business listings. I stopped hoping. That part took the longest. At 28, I partnered with an older investor named Marisol. She had sharp instincts and zero patience for insecurity. "You talk like you still owe someone an apology," she told me once over coffee. For what? For existing. It landed deeper than she knew. When we launched our small development company, I used my married name, Ava Collins, not my maiden name. I told myself it was branding. Maybe it was something else, too. The projects got bigger. Small apartment complexes, a renovated office building near the waterfront, a short-term rental property that turned into our most profitable asset. Daniel handled operations now full-time. We hired a team. I learned how to negotiate without flinching, how to walk away from deals that smelled wrong, how to sit across from men twice my age and not shrink. By 30, I bought the property that would later become the mansion. It wasn't a mansion when I bought it. It was a foreclosure on a cliffside lot, overgrown, abandoned mid-renovation after the previous owner's bankruptcy. Most buyers were scared of it. I wasn't. It took 2 years to complete. Steel gates, floor-to-ceiling glass, clean white stone. Not flashy, just deliberate. It wasn't about status, it was about space. Space nobody could take from me. The day we moved in, Daniel carried me across the threshold jokingly. I laughed, but later, when he went back out to grab another box, I stood alone in the entryway, sunlight spilling across polished concrete, and I cried. Not because of the house, because I had built a life without asking permission. That same year, I heard through a distant cousin that my father's firm was struggling. Bad investments, market miscalculations. He'd leveraged heavily in a development that collapsed when zoning laws shifted. I felt something complicated when I heard it. Not satisfaction, not grief, just distance. My mother apparently downsized from their gated community home into a smaller property across town. They still hosted dinners, still maintained appearances, but cracks were forming. They never reached out, not even when my company's name appeared in a regional business magazine, Ava Collins Developments, featured in bold print. Marisol sent me the framed article as a joke. "Proof," she said. I didn't hang it in my office. I kept it in a drawer. And then 6 months ago, Daniel walked into my office holding a file. "You might want to see this." Inside was a property listing. My childhood home. For sale. I stared at the photo. The front steps where I'd sat crying the night I left. The tall windows of my father's office. Listed at a desperate price. Bank-owned. Foreclosure pending. I didn't speak for a long time. Daniel didn't push. "Do you want it?" he finally asked. That question felt heavier than it should have. Did I want it? The house where I was told I was disposable? The house that exhaled relief when I left? I surprised myself. Yes. Not for revenge, not to move back, but because unfinished stories have weight. The purchase was clean. Corporate entity, no personal names attached. They never knew. Until last week. Until the bank finalized transfer paperwork. Until someone somewhere realized the buyer of their former home shared a last name with the poor construction worker they once mocked. And then, they showed up at my gate. Not at the office, not with lawyers, at my house. And I realized something unsettling. They weren't just there because they lost theirs. They were there because they assumed I would open the door. The first time the intercom buzzed, I thought it was a delivery. Daniel was in the backyard reviewing contractor invoices. I was upstairs going through closing documents. I pressed the camera feed on my phone, and there they were. My mother standing stiffly in a pale beige coat, even though it was warm outside. My father beside her, hands clasped behind his back like he was waiting outside a boardroom. He looked smaller. Not physically, but something about his posture felt reduced. For a moment, I couldn't move. 10 years collapsed in my chest. I didn't answer. They rang again. Then my mother leaned toward the speaker. "Ava," she said carefully, "we know you're home." Of course they did. Their old house was on the ridge above ours. From that angle, you could see our glass facade clearly. I took a slow breath and went downstairs. Daniel met me at the hallway. "You don't have to," he said. I nodded. "I know." But I opened the gate. Not wide, just enough. They stepped through cautiously, like the gravel might reject them. Up close, I noticed details I hadn't expected. My mother's hands trembling slightly. My father's suit, expensive but worn at the cuffs. Neither hugged me. We stood in a triangle in the driveway. "You look well," my mother said. I smiled politely. "So do you." It wasn't true. Silence stretched. My father finally spoke. "We were surprised to learn who purchased our former property." Former. He said it like it was a business merger. I didn't respond. "You could have contacted us," he added. I wasn't required to. A flicker crossed his face. Annoyance, then restraint. "We thought it would be appropriate to discuss certain arrangements." My mother cut in quickly. Arrangements. That word again, always so strategic. "What arrangements?" She exchanged a glance with my father. "The market has been unstable," she began carefully. "Temporary setbacks." Temporary. The foreclosure paperwork said otherwise. "We need somewhere to stay," my father said plainly. There it was. No apology, no reflection, just logistics. I felt something inside me cool completely. "You're asking to move in," I said, just to hear it out loud. "For a short time," my mother said, "until we reestablish ourselves." Reestablish, as if my home were a waiting room. I studied their faces. They didn't look ashamed. They looked inconvenienced, like life had disrupted their expectations, and I was the most practical solution. Daniel stepped slightly closer behind me, not protective, present. My father's gaze flicked toward him briefly. There was still that old dismissal there. He didn't say Daniel's name. He never had. "You threw me out at 18, I said quietly. My mother inhaled sharply. "You made a choice," my father replied automatically. There it was, the script, as if a decade hadn't passed. "You told people I ran away. That was to protect the family reputation," my mother said defensively. The irony almost made me laugh. "And now you need that same daughter you erased." My father's jaw tightened. "This isn't about the past. It always is." I walked a few steps away, toward the edge of the driveway where the ocean was visible between trees. I remembered standing on a different curb with a suitcase, remembered the feeling of being unwanted, and here they were, standing on my property, assuming entitlement. But something else surfaced too, a memory. When I was 9, I had a fever, high enough that I hallucinated shadows in the hallway. My father had sat beside my bed all night, changing cold cloths on my forehead. He wasn't always cold. He was controlled, prideful, afraid of vulnerability. I turned back to them. "Why now?" I asked. My mother hesitated. Because they had options before. Friends, clubs, their network. Something changed. My father answered instead. "The bank has frozen several accounts. There are investigations pending." That caught my attention. Investigations? "Routine," he snapped quickly. "Not routine." His eyes flickered. I recognized that look. The same look he had when business deals were fragile than he admitted. And suddenly, I understood something unsettling. They weren't just here because they lost a house. They were here because whatever was coming was bigger. And they needed insulation.
I didn't invite them inside. Not yet. The air between us felt too heavy for my foyer, too complicated for the marble floors and open ceilings. "Investigations into what?" I asked. My father straightened slightly. "It's procedural. One of my former partners is being audited. They're reviewing all associated accounts." "And you're associated?" His silence answered. My mother stepped forward, voice softer now. "Ava, this isn't something we can discuss out here." That tone, the one that used to mean I was being summoned to a private lecture, except this wasn't their house. I folded my arms. "You can explain it right here." My father exhaled sharply, irritation flickering again. "There were investments, complex ones. The market shifted. Paperwork is being reviewed." That's not what an investigation means. His jaw tightened. For the first time, I saw it clearly. Fear, not embarrassment. Fear. A strange calm settled over me. They weren't here because they were nostalgic. They weren't here because they regretted anything. They were here because something was collapsing, and I was stable ground. Daniel spoke quietly from behind me. "Are you facing charges?" My father looked at him like he'd just overstepped. "Nothing has been filed. Nothing has been filed. Yet." My mother's composure finally cracked a little. "We need somewhere private until this resolves." Private. Shielded. Hidden. From reporters, from creditors, from subpoenas. I studied them. 10 years ago, when they told me to leave, they had framed it as discipline. "You chose to embarrass this family," my father had said. The embarrassment had been Daniel, a mechanic's son with a welding job and grease under his nails. He wasn't polished enough. He didn't come from the right clubs, and I chose him anyway. So they chose silence, an exile. Now they stood on my driveway asking for refuge. My mother's eyes met mine, searching. "Families help each other," she said carefully. I almost smiled. "Families don't rewrite history when it's inconvenient." She flinched. That was new. My father stepped forward. "This isn't the time to revisit old grievances." "It's exactly the time," I replied. Silence stretched long enough for the ocean wind to fill it. I lived in a studio apartment with peeling paint. Daniel worked double shifts. We split a single grocery list every week. My voice wasn't shaking. I hadn't rehearsed none of this, but it lived inside me. And when I tried to call you, you didn't answer. My mother's lips parted slightly. You blocked my number. She looked down. My father didn't. We did what we believed was best. There it was again. The justification. Never an apology. Always a strategy. I stepped closer. What exactly do you think living here would look like? Neither answered. I imagined it for them. My father criticizing the minimalist furniture, my mother adjusting curtains, them reclaiming narrative space slowly, re-establishing dominance by inches. No, that would not happen. I'm not turning you away entirely, I said calmly. Hope flickered across my mother's face. But you're not moving in. Then what are you offering? My father asked. He said offering like it was a negotiation. I met his eyes. I'll help you find legal counsel. Quietly. I'll connect you with financial advisors. Daniel nodded slightly beside me. That's more than fair, he added. My father's pride battled visibly with practicality. Living under my roof would have meant surrendering authority. Accepting help without living here allowed him to keep distance. My mother spoke first. You would do that? Yes. After everything? Yes. Because helping them didn't mean erasing what they did. It meant choosing who I am, not reacting to who they were. My father looked at the house behind me, at the steel and glass and stone, at the view, and something in his expression shifted. Not envy, not anger, recognition. You built this, he said quietly. Yes. Without you. He nodded once, slowly. We will accept your assistance. Not gratitude, but acceptance. That was as close as he could get. They turned toward the gate. Before they stepped through, my mother looked back. Ava. I waited. I didn't know how to let you be different. There it was. Not an apology, but the closest thing to truth. I know. They left without hugging me, without drama. Just two aging figures walking down a driveway they once believed I never would own. Daniel slipped his hand into mine. You okay? I exhaled slowly. Yeah. But as I watched their car disappear down the road, one question lingered. What exactly were they running from? And how much of it would eventually land at my door?
The first news article came out 3 weeks later. It wasn't dramatic, no flashing headlines, just a quiet financial column buried halfway down the page. Local investment firm under federal review. My father's name was mentioned in paragraph 6, questioned, under scrutiny, possible misrepresentation. I read it at my kitchen island while Daniel made coffee. The ocean outside was calm. Inside, something old stirred. Not panic, not anger, recognition. The empire I grew up inside had always looked solid. Mahogany desks, crystal glasses, strategic dinners. But it had been built on something fragile, perception, and perception doesn't survive investigation. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. Ava. My father. His voice sounded smaller. We've retained counsel, he said. Thank you for the referral. You're welcome. A pause. There may be additional inquiries. About you? I asked. About past transactions. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. I remembered the dinners where deals were discussed in half sentences, the envelopes, the whispered off the books. Back then, I was the daughter told not to ask questions. Now I was the woman who understood what questions meant. I won't be implicated, I said calmly. You weren't involved. That's not what I meant. Silence again. Then softer. I know. It was the closest thing to an apology I would get. After we hung up, I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows and watched the horizon. 10 years ago, when they threw me out, I thought exile meant failure. I didn't realize it was insulation. Distance had protected me. If I'd stayed, if I'd married the approved banker instead of Daniel, if I'd entered the firm like they planned, my name might have been in paragraph 6. Instead, it wasn't. Daniel wrapped his arms around me from behind. "You did the right thing," he murmured. "I didn't do anything heroic. You chose your life. That was enough." Over the next month, the investigation deepened. More articles, more quiet conversations. My parents downsized from their estate to a modest rental outside the city. No gala farewell, no announcement, just a for sale sign. My mother called once. "Your father won't say it," she began, voice tired, "but he's grateful." I didn't respond immediately, because gratitude wasn't what I'd needed at 18. I needed love, acceptance, safety. Still, I said, "I'm glad you're safe." She hesitated. "We thought control meant protection," she admitted. "We thought if we shaped you, we could shield you." From what? From instability, from struggle. A quiet laugh escaped me. "You threw me directly into struggle." I see that now. And for the first time in my life, I believed she did. We didn't repair everything. There was no cinematic reconciliation, no tearful embraces under soft music. Healing, I learned, is quieter than that. It's a phone call that doesn't end in accusation. It's a boundary that stays intact. It's helping without surrendering. Months passed. The investigation concluded with fines, restrictions, public embarrassment, but no prison. Their world shrank. Mine didn't. One evening, my father asked to meet for dinner, neutral ground, a small Italian restaurant near the harbor. He looked older, not defeated, just aware. We spoke about practical things at first, legal outcomes, future plans. Then, halfway through the meal, he set his fork down. I was wrong about Daniel. I glanced up. "That's not why we're here," I said. "It should be said anyway." Daniel, sitting beside me, offered a small nod. My father inhaled slowly. "I thought wealth equaled stability. And I confused stability with control." There it was. Not dramatic, not emotional, but honest. "I don't need you to approve of my life," I replied gently. "I know." "Then we're okay." He looked relieved, not because I forgave him entirely, but because I wasn't carrying the war forward. When we left the restaurant, there was no hug, just a handshake, and that felt appropriate. On the drive home, Daniel squeezed my hand. "You're lighter." I was, because closure isn't about watching someone fall. It's about realizing you don't need them to rise. My parents never moved into my mansion. They never needed to, and I never needed them to kneel at my door. What mattered was this. When they tried to rewrite my future at 18, I stepped outside the script. When they returned years later asking for shelter, I didn't react from revenge. I responded from strength. That's the difference. That's growth. If this story felt personal to you, tell me what boundary you had to set. Thank you for listening.